after college, you played in this. When I was reading this, doing my research on you, I was shocked.
Right.
East-West Shrine Game, North-South Game, Senior Bowl, Hula Bowl. I mean, looking back, I mean, how much did playing these games help you once in the draft? But I mean, even taking it a little bit further, college players today, I mean, I think sometimes people have to beg them to play in one game, the post-college career. Talk about your experience in those and how you feel those games maybe helped you as far as your draft status.
Yeah, I mean, it was the back that particular year, the one that there was always a conflict was the East-West Shrine Game and the Hula Bowl were on the same week. So you couldn't really, you had to pick one or the other if you were invited. Well, I started out with the Blue-Gray Game, which was North-South, the Blue-Gray Game down in Montgomery, Alabama, and went from there to the East-West Shrine Game in San Francisco, then out to the Hula Bowl, and then back to Alabama for the Senior Bowl in Mobile. So I was literally gone for 6 weeks and had to get schoolwork material from my professors to kind of keep up with things. Any kind of tests that I had to take would have been, done. There was no computer and all that. It was just done by snail mail, and it was crazy. But I wanted to keep up with the academics, graduate on time, and all that sort of thing. That was important to my family and myself. But it was very interesting, and I didn't even think about injury or anything. I thought that it was 4 opportunities to prove that you could play against the best. And I remember the Senior Bowl most vividly in that, you'd look, we'd be doing one-on-one pass rush drills, and I remember lining up against Carl Barzilowskis, who was a first-round pick out of Indiana with the New York Jets, and Ed Too Tall Jones, who was a first-round pick with the Dallas Cowboys in pass rush drills. And I remember all these owners, general managers, head coaches would just crowd in and form a human circle. And we barely had room to operate. They wanted an up-close and personal look because, there wasn't all the sophisticated computer videos and all the things that there are today. There was 16 millimeter film that they were taking in practice, but these guys wanted to have, firsthand, up-close and personal look at what you were like in terms of movement, ability to take on, rushers and that sort of thing. And I remember thinking, well, if I perform well, this is big right now. It was an interesting time, but I thought that I think it helped me. I think it helped me quite a bit. I ended up being the 60th pick in the draft. The Bengals had that 60th pick with the trade they had with the New Orleans Saints. And in today's NFL with 32 teams, it would have been a late second-round pick. There were 64 picks in the first 2 rounds, so it would have been a late 2. And this situation was an early 3. And I was thrilled to death to get drafted by the Cincinnati Bengals. And I remember Bill Tiger Johnson, my first line coach with the Bengals, was one of the guys at the Senior Bowl that was, up close and personal, trying to take a look at pass rush drills and that sort of thing.
As you said, you get the call, 3rd round. The draft today is this big spectacle. Everyone, it's almost like a holiday. Everyone looks forward to it.
Right.
We saw what it can do to a city like Cincinnati a year ago when they were able to draft somebody like a Joe Burrow. It brings a new excitement. Talk about those experiences leading up to getting that call, if you got a call ever, how that went down as compared to today's draft.
Yeah, today obviously there's the draft it's a cottage industry in itself. There are Mel Kiper has made a living with a college draft. Jerry Jones, the drugstore list with his publication for years and years, and it all evolved. Back then there was nothing. There wasn't any cable television. There weren't any cell phones. There weren't any computers. It was just landline phones. That was the communication. So it was just phone calls, and I got a phone call to let me know that I was taking an interesting story. The Cleveland Browns had a pick shortly after the Bengals did, and I got a call from the Cleveland Browns, and literally it was in the hallway of my dormitory at Syracuse. It was a payphone. That was the number I was giving everybody for the draft. I didn't have any other method to get in touch with anybody. So I have that payphone, and I'm begging guys to not use that payphone. I'm trying to keep them off that payphone as much as I possibly can. ask them to go to another floor or someplace else. I just need to keep this phone free. And I get a call from the Cleveland Browns saying, we're going to take you with the next pick. And I thought the draft was over. I mean, that was the year of the World Football League, and the draft took forever because they were calling guys and seeing if they had signed with the World Football League. And I was drafted in the first round by the Birmingham Americans of the World Football League. And teams were calling and asking, had you signed, I said, no, I want to play in the National Football League. Well, it really slowed the draft process, like I said, because there was everything was done by phone, and it was a landline phone. It was a slow process. So I had a bunch of my friends and brother up at Syracuse for the draft to celebrate, and it was like, geez, man, the air's coming out of the balloon. This is taking forever. They must be there were 17 rounds back when I was drafted, and I figured they were probably in about the 15th round. Well, heck, they're only, they've even gotten to barely past 50 picks. And the Cleveland Browns call, and I said, okay, well, I'll stay by the phone. And then I get another phone call, and it's Tiger Johnson. And I said, I picked the phone up, and I said, Cleveland. And he goes, don't ever say that word again. It was Bill Tiger Johnson. He goes, I said, well, Cleveland said, I told you not to say that word again. We drafted you before the Cleveland Browns. This is the Cincinnati Bengals. We just took you with the 60th pick of the draft, and we want you to come out here in the next couple of days and meet the media, and I want to work you out and introduce you to other people in the organization. Yes, sir, that'd be great. And that's pretty much what the draft was about. And it was a lot of waiting. I mean, after those all-star games, just go back to school, go to class, back to the college life, and then just wait for that draft to take place.
We talked about your experiences playing at Syracuse, Ben Swartzwalder, and you come to Cincinnati, and your head coach is a legendary Paul Brown in your first couple seasons. Talk about your first couple years and that experience with who many feel is one of the greatest innovators in the game, Paul Brown.
I think that, it's a situation, Dave, where you have to be lucky as to where you go and who you're working with. I think that dictates a successful career a lot of times. People are saying, well, Sam Darnold, he was betrayed going to the New York Jets. He didn't really have a good coaching staff. He didn't have players around him. I get drafted by the Cincinnati Bengals. Paul Brown's my head coach. He's in the Hall of Fame. Tiger Johnson's my first line coach, as good a line coach as I could ever hope to have. I remember talking to that kind of thing with Kenny Anderson. Kenny Anderson drafted by Paul Brown and Bill Walsh were the two guys that had the biggest impact in the beginning of his career. If he had been drafted by the Atlanta Falcons, who had nobody, basically, how lucky are you to get drafted by somebody with the football IQ and the football acumen and the football ingenuity and intelligence of Paul Brown? I mean, he was on the cutting edge all the time of everything. There was no stone unturned. Every I was dotted, every T was crossed. Most organized man I'd ever met. I think if he ran for president, he would have been a great president. If he wanted to get into business, he could have run P&G. Paul Brown could have done anything he wanted to do at an extremely high level. He was just one of those kind of guys. And then Bill Tiger Johnson, was a dream come true for a young lineman. He was an all-pro center with the San Francisco 49ers. His quarterback was Y.A. Tittle before he went to the Giants. I mean, you got a guy like that teaching you. And Paul Brown would only have really good teachers as his assistant coaches. He could attract any assistant coach he wanted. This is Paul Brown. So he always had great assistants. And I was blessed to be drafted by the Cincinnati Bengals and Paul Brown and Bill Tiger Johnson and learning under the guidance of those two guys, principally in the early stages of my career. We'd get tested on our assignments all the time. And Paul Brown said to me, I'm going to give you 2 grades. I'm going to give you a grade on your assignment in the upper right-hand corner. I want you to give me everybody's assignment in the upper left-hand corner. He's the first one that kind of broadened my horizon about not just tunnel vision, about what you're doing, but why you're doing it. If you pull, the tackle blocking down, is the center reaching, fullback filling, what's going on? What's going on around you? So see the big picture. And he taught me a lot of football by introducing me to that concept of not just what you're supposed to do. And that eventually, during the course of my career, I ended up playing, all 5 line positions in the same game a couple of times. And I take it all the way back to my early stages of my pro career when Paul Brown started introducing me to understanding the big picture.
You've mentioned Bill Tiger Johnson. You also had a chance, not just Paul Brown. Bill Tiger Johnson became a head coach for the Bengals. Homer Rice, and then I think the coach many people remember, Forrest Gregg, who led the Bengals to the '81 Super Bowl. And talk about, you've talked about Bill Tiger Johnson, but talk about Homer Rice and Forrest Gregg.
Dave Lapham here, and every day I am grateful for my experience to have played professional football. As a player, I realized self-motivation, leadership, and appreciating your teammates are key. At First Star Logistics, you can use those same attributes to create the life you want for you and your family. Build your future by working hard like I did. You'll see results both on and off the field. Call First Star Logistics today and be part of our winning team.
Yeah, I mean, two different types of coaches for sure. Homer Rice was an offensive genius, but Homer Rice didn't have the command of the locker room and the players like Forrest Gregg did. I mean, Forrest Gregg wasn't as involved with X's and O's, maybe as Paul Brown or Homer Rice or guys like that. But I mean, with Forrest Gregg, you knew exactly where you stood. It was all about discipline. It was all about conditioning. I mean, he played for the greatest coach that people think of all time, Vince Lombardi. And Vince Lombardi called him the best football player he ever coached. So it gave, in our mind, I remember the first time Forrest Gregg got up in front of the team at a team meeting and put his hands on the podium that he was speaking from, and there were Super Bowl rings on his fingers. And I'm looking at him and I'm saying to myself, well, Vince Lombardi says he's the best player he ever coached, and all those great Packer teams, and he's wearing Super Bowl rings. I'm going to listen to this guy. Instantaneous credibility with me and with everybody else on the football team. And I think that he basically instilled confidence and discipline and all the things that needed to be instilled. And first year we went 6-10, but we could have very easily gone 10-6. We were in every single football game, and everybody we played knew that they were in a battle, in a challenge. We just had not gotten to the point where we were finishing football games at the level we should have finished, because in the NFL, literally, it comes down to a play or two. And the following year, we finished games and ended up going to the Super Bowl with a 12-4 regular season record. And we had a November to remember. The way the calendar year worked out that year, with 5 football games and Pittsburgh Steelers, Denver Broncos, good football teams. And we swept them. We go 5-0 in the month of November. That set us up for big success that year.
You come to Cincinnati, your first year 7-7, year 2 11-3, losses to the Steelers and the Browns before falling to the hated Oakland Raiders in the playoffs. Talk about that season, and when you go back and you look at all the years that you've been associated and watched Bengals football, how good was that team?
It was a damn good football team. Best record from a winning percentage standpoint, single season in team history still. 11-3 is percentage points better than 12-4. But that football team, we lost to the Cleveland Browns, who were horrible that year. But it was a division rival in the Battle of Ohio. I understood a little bit about, Paul Brown had built up the Cleveland Browns and then comes to Cincinnati and is trying to do the same thing, and how important the game was, that Battle of Cleveland, Cincinnati. And that year, I understood that team should have never beaten us. We lost to Pittsburgh twice, who ended up winning the Super Bowl, by the way, that year by a touchdown or less both times. We lose to the Cleveland Browns, and Greg Pruitt from Oklahoma, I'll never forget, I think he ran the ball for over 100 yards, might have had receptions for over 100 yards as well. He pretty much single-handedly, beat us that day as a weapon. We didn't do enough to put enough points on the board to win that football game. If they score 30, we got to score 31, whatever the case may be. But that Cleveland loss killed us. And Pittsburgh went 12-2, won the division. We went 11-3. We're a wild card team, and we lost by a field goal to the Oakland Raiders. And we had a situation at the end of the football game where Ted Hendricks was pass rushing against Boobie Clark, and it was a mismatch having that edge rush guy against a running back. And, then all of a sudden, here comes slide protection. start to figure out, okay, let's slide and make sure that the offensive line was on that outside rush guy, even though it's a linebacker in a 3-4 defense, let the guard slide at the end, let him tackle slide out to that outside backer. And so we made some adjustments, sliding strong and weak side from a formation standpoint and advanced a little bit offensively. But so Ted Hendricks had a couple of sacks down the stretch, took us out of field goal range and would have taken that game into overtime. But it was a great year, really good football team. There's no question about it. That was one of the years that Kenny Anderson won back-to-back passing titles. He did it in the 70s, did it in the 80s. In 2 different decades to win back-to-back passing titles is quite an accomplishment. Isaac Curtis and Bob Trumpy and just a bunch of weapons, no question about it.
Kind of go through a little bit of a drought. Something Bengal fans nowadays are used to.
Well, the next year we went 10-4 and did make the playoffs. So that was
right.
The best team in team history record-wise to not even make the playoffs because they only had 1 wild card. Now with a 10-4 record, there's no way you don't make it. But 10-4 and we don't even go to the playoffs. That was a disappointment.
We talked about Forrest Gregg, 1981, a year Bengals fans still remember vividly, not just because of the success, but really because of a game that was played in Cincinnati that everyone calls the Freezer Bowl, against the Chargers. And that, talk about, the Reds are we're recording this, we're a day away from opening day. The Reds are going to play probably in some cold conditions opening day, but nothing like what you guys faced that day. Talk about, mentally how prepared you had to be, and then physically how prepared you had to be just to survive that day.
Yeah, that was, I'm from New England, northeast of Boston originally, so I've played in cold weather. But you can never be prepared for 59 below wind chill. It was crazy. The raw temperature was 9 below, wind chill was 59 below. That wind was whipping off the Ohio River and just unbelievable. I remember toward the end of the week of practice, it was cold. And we went out in sweatpants and sweatsuits and, tried to work our way through a walkthrough, and man, it's going to be cold. Well, then before that game, I was playing against a guy with the San Diego Chargers by the name of Gary Big Hands Johnson. He was appropriately named. His hand was like a ham with 5 hot dogs hanging off it, big, strong hands. And he would try to get up the field, grab, and rip and pull. So I didn't want to have extraneous cloth on my arms, like a long john or a long sleeve or a sweatshirt or whatever. I wanted to try to go bare-armed, and I thought, I'm from New England. Let's get after it. So we go out as an offensive line without any sleeves. And literally, I just wore normal stuff, shorts, T-shirt. I did put a pair of socks on, plastic bags, and then another pair of socks because I knew from my experience in New England, if your feet get cold, you're done. You can't let your feet get cold. If your feet get cold, you're suffering. So wanted to keep those puppies warm if I could. And then the officials, once they decided to play the game, it almost got postponed. The NFL decided almost not to play that game. Then they decided to go ahead and let it go. And once they did, the officials allowed you to put Vaseline on exposed skin. Your face is what they were talking about, face and ears. Well, my arms are exposed, and put Vaseline on those bad boys. So remember the first time Big Hands came up the field and swatted, man, hit the back of my tricep, and it was so cold, and he hit that. His hand slipped right off there, and it stung like hell. But I'm like, man, this is working. This is going to be good. So it was. I ran around for 3.5 hours, never broke a sweat, bone dry. Couldn't sweat, not even a drop on the eyebrow. I remember the hardest part about that football game was going into the locker room at halftime and getting warmed up, then realizing how bad it was when you're going out there to play that second half. So it was brutally cold. I remember sitting on a heated bench, never had a heated bench before. That was first experience, the heated bench. And remember the defense turned San Diego over, and I jump off that bench was like literally popping into a freezer. So I never did it again. That contrast was too much. So that game was an incredible experience. But Forrest Gregg, before the game, his pregame talk was, "Men, I've done this. he played in that game against the Dallas Cowboys, where the Green Bay Packers, Dallas Cowboys, famous game, 13 below raw temperature. Not quite as bad wind chill, but the raw temperature is 13 below. That's the coldest. Ours is second coldest raw temperature. And he was involved in that famous quarterback sneak. Jethro Pugh, Bart Starr. Pugh gets knocked out of there by Kramer and Forrest Gregg, and Bart Starr's in the end zone. So here's a guy that played and coached in the coldest games in NFL history. He got up before the game and said to us, "Men, it's going to be like going to the dentist. You don't want to do it, but you gotta. So go out there, just play. Go out there, forget about everything, think warm, and play." That was basically his message to us. It was a good one.